Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lethal Weapon, as well as the latest episode of Blindspot. Like I've kind of been doing all week, letting you know ahead of time that, if you feel the need, say for example, you don't care what I have to say about Lethal Weapon, you only care about what I have to say about Blindspot. Look in the description down below, you can see the time of when I start talking about Blindspot, so you can skip ahead. Once again, I've been doing this for a while, but I'm just kind of making it more noticeable. I'm kind of bringing it up every one of these. I'll be doing it for a little while, so I know you're going to get sick and tired, but it's just a constant reminder because I know not everyone is into everything I'm watching. So, I might be talking about 2 or 3 shows and you might only care about one of them, and that one ends up happening to be like in the middle or at the very end of these podcasts. So it's like, I'm just kind of want to give you that option if you were ever curious about it. I mean, it'd be cool if you sat down and listened to the entire thing, but why listen about a show that you don't really care about, so just want to get out the way. Now, let's talk about Lethal Weapon. A very good episode on many different levels. Take the kind of not so serious side first, and then kind of later on talk about the more serious stuff. For one, that whole situation where Roger got super jealous. He ends up going to Trish's office. I'm like, whoa. Who's this guy? Who's this Denzel working with? She's like, Desmond? No, that's Denzel. Why you, wait. You got this guy looking the way he does working with you? Oh, he's your assistant. This is the assistant that you're quote unquote breaking in. He's like, you got to fire him. I don't care what you have to do. You fire him now. And she's like, Roger, you're being a little crazy. He's like, no. I mean, look at this picture. Picks up the family picture. You can barely see me in this picture, and no way he's gonna see it. Let alone you can't even see it, even sitting at your desk. Even when he was talking to the Desmond, he's like, my wife been married for 20 years, got 3 kids. He's like, I'm also a homicide detective, touching his gun, homicide. Even love later on during that whole situation where like his life, the bomb is about to go off, and he hits the trip wire, and he's like telling Riggs, he's like, okay, just tell my family I love them, and tell Trish my final words, that she is not allowed to get remarried, okay? She has to die alone after I'm gone. And talking about, and also tell her she has to fire Desmond. And after Rick saves his life, it's like, okay, so who's Desmond? And ends up kind of throwing that into Roger's face a little bit later on. It's like, oh, we can always talk about Desmond. He's like, don't bring up Desmond. It's like, hey, you brought him up first, so. Also love how later on in the episode, Riggs is calling for backup. It's like, Bailey shows up. She's like, I don't know if this is a kind of joke or something, but, Riggs is asking for backup. And the captain's like, send everyone. It's like, if Riggs, the Mr. goes solo, not asking for backup, ask for backup, it's like, yo, we need to get some backup. The things are really that bad. I love the captain's reactions about everything. Just, even later on when he's like, where's Riggs? I'm literally sitting here trying to find, the moment I'm trying to apologize to him, he's nowhere to be found. Can someone bring him in, before, this feeling quickly fades away and I go back to, basically disliking him a little bit. So I even love that the fact that at the beginning of the episode, his daughter is reluctant to like go serious on him. She even throws the game because he's all getting hot, excited and everything. He's sweating like crazy. He's dancing and all that. But he's like, oh, you let me win, huh? And then when Trish was kind of like, okay, she's got to go to school, he almost acted like a little kid. He's like, oh man, we're about to go at it. Like I was about to school her in this game, but it's so interesting when you get to see Roger, who's kind of like, even that's just why one of the many reasons why I love Damon Wayans, just because he does that so good. He kind of plays that. It naturally flows into like any character he plays. He has that serious side, but at the same time, he just like adds that like kid-like fun to everything he does, every role he does. So, he's just a naturally funny dude. And Riggs, I got to give it to, isn't the actor's name Clayne Crawford? Got to give it to him because he's crazy kind of funny. He's funny in the sense of like the way he does, more so than anything, the character of Riggs is super sad, but at the same time, he's eccentric and off the wall type of crazy. I did love that whole situation. Kind of getting into the action of the episode when they were chasing that guy, Chad Jackson, who, interestingly enough, is the actor who played Neil on Once Upon a Time. I was like, Neil! Or Bellfire, whichever, if you want to call him by his Enchanted Forest name. I know It's not even the right podcast to be talking about Once Upon a Time, I know, but just had to bring that up because like that's one of the most notable. I've seen him pop up and stuff from another thing, but that's kind of the most notable thing I know him from. Like I've come to see him periodically once, so that was all. I got throwing it out there. But the fact of the matter is, he jumped off the roof of the building, lands on a truck, quickly jumps off that truck, and then kind of jumps over some bushes and kind of gives a salute to Riggs before he runs away. And then Roger's like, "How the hell did he do that?" And even Riggs was like, "That SOB is crazier than me." And it's like, wait, that for one, that's almost kind of a compliment because Riggs is the definition of crazy. And it's like, if you can out crazy Riggs, that means you're something special. Even love the conversation he had with the doc where she was like, wait, so you realize the things you do is crazy? He's like, yeah, I realize. It's not like I'm just doing it without realizing. Because I know this is crazy, but it's like crazy makes things more fun. That plus the fact is at the end of the episode, you had Roger being crazy, being like, all right, trying to find out how to get rid of the bomb. And he's like, okay, follow my lead, shoots out the window, jumps through the glass, throws the bomb up. Riggs jumps out the window with him, aims up and shoots the bomb, and they fall into the pool. I was just like, dude, that was sick. Just another reason to get super hyped tonight. It's just like, oh, you gotta give it props to this show, like in its action sequences. They do stuff good. Like that was just probably my favorite thing in the episode. That was just so good. But an interesting thing about this episode is kind of constant like parallels being drawn between Chad and Riggs. Because it kind of gets brought up. The fact of the matter is, like, Roger kind of basically brings up the fact is he doesn't know that much about Riggs. He knows Riggs is crazy, but Riggs doesn't talk about himself that much. It's kind of like the only thing Roger pretty much knows is about the whole baby situation and his wife. It's like, other than that, because the fact is Chad is kind of, it's like, oh, you don't know what someone's been through, what they've seen over there, because Riggs has never really even brought up his time, over there, kind of like, when he was part of the Navy, wasn't it? Part of the military. I'll just leave it at that without getting specific where what he was part of. But you see the parallels between him and Chad, and the fact of the matter is, because even Roger's like, a lot of the stuff that you point out about Chad is like, even he was like, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to it. It's like hard for me to tell whether they're talking about Chad or whether they're talking about you, just because there's so many similarities, kind of their background in the military. The fact is that he was a sniper, Riggs was a sniper. The only difference between them is, and it's something Riggs kind of brings up later on in the episode, is the fact is that when Chad came back, all he had was himself. Riggs had a guardian angel, his wife Miranda, looking out for him. So, who's to say he wouldn't be in the exact same position that Chad was in if it wasn't for Miranda, because she kind of helped piece him back together. Because he's like, over there, it's one different thing. It's kind of like, hey, like there's always like a threat. There's always kind of like that heightened sense of living, just because you never know where the next thing is coming. So you're always in a kind of a state of rush, kind of like that. I'm sure that fight or flight part of your brain is always kind of flipping on and off kind of type of thing. Like, or more probably on more often than it is off. And it's like when you come back here, everything feels so far away. The people and the places you knew, it just all seems so foreign to you. And, Miranda essentially kept him grounded. And I feel like that's the main reason why Roger, like, because even Riggs asked him, like, why is this case so important to you? It's because basically it gave him a better understanding of Riggs. Like, Riggs is already like family to him, but he wants to understand him better. He wants to help him because he knows how much pain Riggs is in and just how much he wants to be there for his partner. And it's like, he's like, starts bringing up these parallels, kind of wondering like, hey, maybe you should kind of actually talk to someone. And it does seem like he's willing to talk to Roger at the end of the episode. It's like, oh, I kind of want to talk now. But Roger's kind of like, okay, don't ruin this moment. He's sitting on the edge of that building, which is like, that always kind of freaked me out earlier when he was just kind of balancing on the edge of the roof of that building, and just you happen to see Roger kind of looking through the police station window and end up seeing him on the other, like a building across the street doing that. I was just like, dude, don't do that. And every time his leg would slip a little bit, like, I think that comes from the fact is I have a fear of heights, so that kind of messes with me a little bit. It's just like, ugh. But I mean, it all ended up in a very interesting way where you had Riggs actually introducing Chad to the doc. I mean, the only person that really believed that Chad didn't kill, what was the dude's name, Dr. Cox, was Riggs, because he brought up a good point. It's like, yeah, he's a sniper, so why would he attack him from the back if, it's like, being in the state he's in, it's like, obviously he would if he were going to do it like that, he'd do it from up front. He wouldn't do it from behind. But it turns out that the person behind it was the pharmaceutical company that he was all mixed up in. Because essentially, he lost people, when he was in the military, and even when he came back home, a lot of the people he considered like brothers, not like brothers, were brothers to him, ended up dying, and they ended up being part of this like experimental drug trial. It's basically an antidepressant, but which had side effects. Which I kept wondering every time I see it. I was like, "What's up with this like obsession with milk? How he keeps like drinking milk all the time?" And it's like that was a key part, and it's just like it had some kind of side effect like that. But it's because Chad saw what was happening. That I think it was like, I don't know whether I missed it, or my interpretation was, I don't know whether it was connected to the drugs or not, but it's like all his his brothers. I mean, they alluded to it, but I don't know if they directly said it. But basically, the drugs played a role in all of his friends dying in those particular accidents. Whether it was just kind of like they were just the antidepressants just kind of had an opposite effect and kind of flared their PTSD or whatever, and ended up causing them to just not have good enough reaction time, and ended up essentially putting them in situations where they ended up dying. I don't know. It seems like that was the case. Like I don't know. I don't really remember them saying that expressly. I know Riggs brought it up. It's like, is that, you really think that's a coincidence that all these vets ended up dying, especially ones who particularly took this medicine? But the fact is that, Riggs was able to get the doc to talk to him. I mean, so, he was wondering, like, is she helping you? And it's kind of like, I guess she's kind of in the process of, she's slowly but surely, like, helping him. Like, Riggs is a hard nut to crack. But I feel like out of anybody, Roger might be able to talk to, like, might be able to kind of, I think he's what helps kind of open Riggs up more for the doc. It's kind of like a 1-2 team. They kind of like a little bit of a combo. Roger's kind of getting him to open up a little more, and maybe we'll kind of see him open up more to the doc in the future. And kind of a side note to this episode was the whole Cruz situation. There was that guy, what's his name, Salazar, that basically he got the information about the bomb from. And then, like, Bailey kept asking him questions about it, but he kind of was a little dodgy about it. Like, don't worry about how I know this dude. It's kind of like, we knew each other because we grew up in the same neighborhood. Like, that's the only connection they have. But Bailey kind of looks like there's a lot more to it. Like, my interpretation of it is probably like, Cruz had a past, like, gang related, and somehow he, I guess because of his gang past, he was able to become a part of the gang unit, because it's like, oh, he knew that world somewhere. I guess he turned his life around and kind of decided, I'm not going to be part of that world anymore, and became a cop. That particular guy, Salazar, is like an arsonist or whatever, like, because he has bird marks all over his hands. So that's why he's so familiar with bombs and stuff like that, because it's like, oh, I see, he basically said, he was like, yo, I see your partner's looking at me. Like, I guess she's getting to see what it's like when you get too close to flames. So I'm guessing it was kind of a minor storyline, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be something that kind of pops up much later on in the season. Just like his past a little bit, because you also find out it seems like he's a little bit like Riggs, because the fact of the matter is, during the whole situation at the store, he was the one that kind of pushed forward, but Bailey was like, shouldn't we wait out here? It's like, no, he told me to cover the front, so I'm gonna cover the front. He went in, almost got his head blown off because of it. Then he also went to Riggs first about the information about the bomb and whatnot. So I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see more about his character. I mean, he was literally only at it he appeared in the episode before last, and last week's episode, it was kind of his first time being a part of the team. Like I said, there was a little difference between him and Bailey. Kind of like she had her problems with him, but it seems like that's kind of disappeared. But it does seem like he's kind of piqued her curiosity about his past and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And now moving on to this week's episode of Blindspot. Really good episode. A lot of stuff went down. Let's start off with the Reed situation. I was actually surprised of how that turned out. I was halfway expecting it to be Reed to be like, no, let's not call this in. Like, Reed was like, no, we have to call this in, and then Tasha was like, no. He's like, what do you mean no? It's like, you're standing over the dead body. You broke in here. You're wearing gloves. You got his blood on your shoes. Yeah, I'm your friend, and I'm going to help you out and everything. But if we really call this in, who's to say anyone would necessarily be on your side? Literally, the evidence is stacked against you. And, then that was that whole tape situation. But I love how Tasha's handling it. She's like, yo, we get back, we strip out our clothes. Which, like, to me, they weren't awkward about that at all. I guess they've changed in front of each other before. I guess considering the situation, it's like, it was just kind of like, I guess it's weirder because I'm pointing it out so much. It's kind of like, yo, if I didn't point it out so much, it wasn't weird for them. So why am I making it weird? Not necessarily to be weird. I was just, cause I'm always trying to ship people together. So I'm just kind of like, hey, Reed, Tasha, your friends and everything. So, probably took a little bit more. Probably not. Maybe they just don't match each other. The last person Reed dated was Kirk's sister, Sarah. So that didn't, sadly didn't work out. So to our knowledge, they're both single. I'm very curious. Just kind of a side note that kind of popped up in my head. I wonder, is that whole, like, because Tasha has a gambling problem. That's kind of what led to a lot of issues in season 1, because, like, her gambling kind of got the best of her and led to her getting mixed up in a lot of stuff, like Carter and that other dude that was trying to gather evidence against Mayfair because he thought Mayfair was dirty and whatnot. I wonder, is that going to kind of pop up this season? Will we see more ramifications from her gambling issues in the past, or is it like her gambling is going to come to bite her in the ass this season? I don't know. It don't seem like that might be the case, but, you never know. It's still pretty early on in the season, so... But going back to it, Tasha was like, yo, what we're going to do is we're going to wait till this gets reported. It turns into, the police refer to it as a crime scene. We come in as FBI because it's like, oh, we have a connection to it. This case is important to us. Like, until we're called in, we'll go in. I'll get the tape that's stuck in the VCR. It was stuck. That was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, crap, it's stuck. I was like, don't tell me she's going to be banging on it and they're going to come in and see her banging. I was like, oh, no, she was able to get it out. But then it's like, oh, she didn't have time to put it up, so she had to hide it. It's just, things just keep getting worse in that situation. And you even have Reed being like, it finally like is hitting Reed. He's getting super nervous. He wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to, like, hey, let's talk this out. But it's like, nope, Tasha, I literally went from Tasha to Sasha to back to Tasha. Tasha doesn't want to do that. Like, she's trying to look out for her friend. She truly believes that he didn't kill Jones, which I truly believe the same thing too. Interestingly thing is the whole like, oh, she noticed like, oh, you have a knife missing. He's like, I have a whole bunch of knives. It broke and I tossed it out. And to me, it's like, let's not forget who was in your apartment. I can't believe we're not, because it's like the focus of this episode was like covering your tracks and, making sure none of the, anything kind of comes back to Reed. But the thing is, you are forgetting, and the fact is, maybe we'll kind of cover this next episode, but let's actually look for the real killer. My money's still on Freddy. Especially if there's a knife missing and apparently Jones was stabbed. It's like, well, who's to say Freddy didn't take the knife with him, He was in Reed's apartment for quite a while. Place. I think it's an apartment. It might not be an apartment, but I don't know. But Reed's place. He was in Reed's place for a while. So, but that never came up. Like, I'm still suspicious of Freddy because it could literally be any number of people. But I think specifically Freddy, and I think I brought this up last episode, is because Freddy is the most, he was doing okay until Reed kind of brought this back into his life, and now he's knowing that Jones might get away with it, and there's no one there to stop him. It's just kind of like, Freddy probably fell on hard times, and he probably saw Reed kind of breaking into Jones' apartment. Place. I referring to everything as an apartment, broke into Jones' place, and maybe he took that opportunity to do it. I don't know. Like I said, my money's still on Freddy, because Tasha ended up bringing up the fact is that Jones didn't just immediately die from the wounds. He actually died from choking on his own blood. So he had to be sitting there for a while to die from choking his own blood. Rita's like, oh no, I guess you're saying I did it, huh? Why don't you call the police if you really think I did it? Which is like, he didn't do it. But what most likely happened is Jones was there bleeding out. He stood over his body and kind of was like, oh, you're dying. I was like, I could have called for people. But he sat there and stood there and probably just let him die because it was like a lot easier that way. Because it was just like, no, you're going to suffer for what you did. So maybe in his mind, that was kind of the only way there was ever going to be justice, because it's like, there's no way we might ever get a legal case against him. It's like, you're sitting here dying. I'm not going to help you out. Because even Reed still not 100% sure. We kind of got confirmation. I figured he didn't watch the tape, but we got confirmation this episode. Like, no, he didn't do it. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. So there's no telling what actually happened to him. Not less. They still have the tape, so not unless Reed watches it now. The main focus is that, hey, try and put it back before anyone notices, because it's like, oh, all these tapes are here. The only one that happens to be missing is the one connected to Reed. But it's like, it's got his name on it, so it's kind of like, not unless the box it came out of it had his name on it too. So I feel like it's a little hard to really judge that, but not less. Would be the twist is if they bring Freddie in and Freddie ends up pointing a finger towards Reed and stuff like that. He uses what he knows. If he was, say for instance, if he is the killer, maybe he uses what he knows to kind of frame Reed, and that kind of, you'd be like, oh yeah, I saw Reed. Reed's always been so passionate about trying to go after Jones, like trying to make him pay. All these other people said, oh like, I'm like, hey, I'm going to get you and whatnot. So, side note, I kind of left out the fact is that Tasha kind of threatened that dude, the kind of private security guy or whatever, that came knocking on Reed's window last episode when he was basically stalking, parked out front in Jones' place and whatnot. She's like, oh yeah, it happened to find out your wife, her visa kind of was a little, kind of ran out, oh, I'd hate to have to report it, but don't want to kind of wouldn't want to do that, got to follow the law and everything. And he's like, oh, I guess, I thought I wrote down a number, but I didn't, so I can't seem to find my notepad. He's like, you're doing the right thing. So I was like, wow, it just shows you how far Tasha is willing to go to make sure that her pal doesn't go to jail. So that's kind of interesting. And then we had things on the Patterson front. I want to talk about how real quickly, how it's kind of like you see them kind of be cute and sweet and everything. It's like, oh, you're so adorable together, but things kind of get complicated. Words kind of getting in the way, and Patterson ended up bringing it up later on in the episode that, hey, work kind of has a tendency to come first, and she's kind of sorry about that. But I'll get into what I was about to get into first. Like the whole fact is that they're like she's trying to scramble that stuff they got from Douglas, which I'll get to later. The recording, that he had captured, with, it was audio recordings of like the whole setup and everything. And it's like, she's trying to like figure things out, because they like modified their voices and whatnot. So, and then the entire time she's doing that, because it's classified, she's having board and wait outside. It's like, okay, we'll have dinner like this, like struggling to do her job, but at the same time, like, no, I don't want to cancel on you. No, please. Just give me 15 minutes. Okay. Just give me 30 minutes. It's like, no, I don't want you to go because I want this to worry, just weird, and I'm nervous and awkward. And she ended up accidentally calling him David. I was like, ooh, she's like, I meant Robert. I didn't mean to call you David. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave. And, I was wondering, I was like, oh, does that just mean that this, like, happened a little too soon? But it's like, because her fear is kind of like, oh, because I kind of, like, put my job first. Like, I kind of, the way she is like, she loves her job and everything. And he's telling her, that's not a bad thing. I love the fact that you love your job. And I would never ask you to kind of, that's your first priority. I would never ask you to change that. He's like, I want every bit of you. I don't want just kind of like, oh, this part of you that you can spare, like, away from your job. It's like, if it even causes even the you that's in, like, that loves your job, I want that part of you too, because it's every bit of you. Which kind of like, because she might look at her like situation and think like, it's a bad thing to kind of be obsessed with her job. And I guess that's kind of one thing, like she was never able to share that 100% with David. I mean, because a lot of stuff she does is classified. But I mean, with Border's job, there's still some classified stuff, but it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this classified work. You can talk about it a little bit to a certain extent, I guess. It's like, there's a lot more freedom there than she had with David, because it was just a straight out civilian. So, but I don't know, because part of my worry was kind of like, is this too soon after David for her to, because it's only been like 3 months since season 1, but like she had the whole episode about kind of getting clarity for the, whole David situation. So I don't know. Maybe that turns out to be a case, maybe not. I don't want it to be that way, because, this is like, they're cute together and everything, and it's like, it's so, like I said, finding out last season, like, it's like, oh, is there something there, and now it becoming a thing? It's just, I don't know. I just worry that maybe they're trying too hard, and that's their problem. It's like, just let things take their natural course, But, or maybe it's just naturally because they're very awkward. It seems like Patterson is like a very awkward person. That's what makes it so cute. Makes you wonder, is Ashley Johnson a very awkward person or not? I don't know. She seems like she might not be, but you never know. I mean, really, how do you really judge someone being awkward? I mean, well, I guess my why I would say that is because, like, maybe she's playing Patterson very well because she's a very awkward person herself, and it's like, oh, I don't have to really pretend to be awkward. I'm just naturally like that in real life. Or she a very just straightforward and charismatic person. I mean, not, which I'm not trying to say anyone that's awkward, it can't be charismatic too. I'm just going to shut up. I'm just going to shut my mouth. Moving on. I do love that Patterson was the one that found the mic because she just happened to be leaning in a chair. She happened to see. I was like, oh, dude. The plot thickens finding Naz's. She ended up tracing it back, and it's like, oh, Naz has been listening in on our conversation in Borden's office. So that was interesting for Kurt to learn, especially because him and Nas went off to Naz. Like I said, I was right the first time. Nas, I keep doing that. Went to Bulgaria, kind of the whole Douglas Winter situation, which I ended up finding out not necessarily someone we're supposed to know. I don't think. This might have been like the first season he's been mentioned, but basically the whole like, oh, he hacked the NSA thing. Like, but the way they were talking about it seemed like that was something that you're supposed to know. I guess the main thing they were like, oh my God, this new information is the fact is that Mayfair was connected to like a guy who was hacking in the NSA. Nevertheless, moving on. But they're dealing with him and everything, and then that whole thing between Nas and Kurt happened. To start kissing and they slept. And I was like, wow, was not expecting that, because there's that back in my mind. It's like, but I want him with Jane. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, it's just kind of like, wow, that's crazy that happened. Wasn't expecting that. I mean, I already had it spoiled for me because of the previews. I saw them kissing in the previews. I was like, what? That's a thing now. So that's interesting. I even love the fact is that when we were driving away, she's like, I guess, the whole, leave everything that happened in Bulgaria stays in Bulgaria. And she's like, everything? He's like, and kind of laughingly says, not everything. But I mean, that whole situation is even more awkward now because he knows about the fact is that Nas has been listening in on their conversations and stuff like that. And you could look at it as almost like, hey, she took advantage of Kurt because she heard him at his most vulnerable moments, and maybe she kind of used that to kind of tap into him and took advantage, like emotionally took advantage of him, because he's in a situation where he's got all these different questions about Sandstone. For him, Mayfair was the answer. Mayfair often did not let him the answer. She was kind of there by his side and kind of helped him get the answers he needed, provided him. And he was hoping that during this whole situation with Douglas Winter, it could lead to him getting answers, kind of be one final push from Mayfair to kind of get answers. Because it turns out, well, for one, Douglas isn't a spy. I mean, isn't the bad guy that people think he is. He didn't hack into the NSA. He was framed and he ran because it was like, yo, no one's going to believe him. And especially on something as big as treason. Like, there's no, like, for him, it's like, yo, I won't get, a trial or anything. They will straight out kill me. Especially because you end up finding out basically Carter's replacement, the deputy director of the CIA now, that dude ended up coming after him. And it's kind of like, they're basically trying to take him out, or at the very least put him in a very deep, dark hole, because it's like, oh, he leaked out a lot of NSA stuff, and, it's like that includes some CIA operations and stuff like that they don't want stuff like that leaking, so it's like to prevent him from doing it in the future, it's like, oh, we'll just, like I said, take you out or bury you in a deep hole. But, like I said, turns out not to be the case. As I said, framed in everything, and we end up having, he ends up having proof of that, because I did like the fact that he lied about Mayfair, so it's kind of like, I guess that information got intercepted by Mayfair, because he was kind of making it seem like, oh no, he contacted Mayfair directly, but it's like, Kurt kind of called him in a lie. It's like, because he didn't actually know Mayfair's gender, so, kind of just assumed he was a guy, which was very sexist stuff in my mind like that. It's like, oh, like Mayfair can't be a lady in a powerful position. But I mean, I guess in that situation, it's kind of like you take your chances. It's kind of like the chances more likely for Mayfair to be a guy, but not about to go down that deep, dark rabbit hole. But nevertheless, that's not important. I mean, well, it's important because he got set up and everything, but the most important part is the people that set him up. Initially, I was like, the moment it's just two people, I was looking at the persons. I was like, one of them, I was like, that's going to end up being Roman, and that's going to end up being Remy. But it turned out not to be. Well, I was half right. I was like, okay, it's Roman, but the other person, I was like, oh, we're about to hear that it's Jane. And it's like, nope, it's Shepard. Oh, that was the interesting twist. And it basically seems like this was kind of the beginning of Sandstorm's hold in this whole situation, that basically their plan kind of like, this was kind of like the tipping point of the dominoes that kind of led to them kind of going down the, kind of going back to a rabbit hole that they're going down. This whole situation has started with them. But the interesting thing is, we had Kurt saying like he recognized that voice, and they're like, from where? And he's like, he can't place it, but he knows Shepard's voice from somewhere. instinctually, because, okay, now I'm probably a complete and utter idiot for this, but my brain instinctually goes to kind of your typical drama twist. Shepard's his mom? I mean, I don't know. Because I don't remember if they ever really brought up Kurt's mom before. I don't really remember her coming up in conversation. Like, maybe she was brought up before, but like it's been a while since I end up forgetting something like that. Because it was never a big thing. Like, the big thing has always been like the relationship with his dad, but never his mom. You know, obviously, what you'll probably end up finding out is like, oh, his mom is off somewhere else. Like, you know, him and her dad kind of got divorced, or she died from a disease or something like that. She was sick or whatever the case may be, which I'm leaning more towards. But the thing is, I don't know whether I'm confusing that with another show where someone's mom had died from a disease or whatever. Nevertheless, the point is, I was like, hey, maybe that's what the case may be. Maybe his mom died when he was super young, or quote unquote died when she was super young, but faked her death and everything. And it's like, that would explain why she's so obsessed. Well, Sandstorm in general, but you know, she's kind of the head of Sandstorm, so it's kind of understandable why she would be so obsessed with Kurt. Why Sandstorm would keep an eye on him all this time since he was little. I mean, never mind, I have to take that back. You know why? Because I'm a freaking idiot. Because she already admitted last episode, wasn't it, that Shepard said, like, she can't have children. That's why she latches on to Remy and Roman so hard. Like, because they were kind of like her blessing, essentially. Kind of having kids, even though she couldn't have kids. Because of the whole situation with all those people that died. And it just basically destroyed her. It messed with, like, she ended up having to have her uterus removed. So never mind, I take that back. At the very least, you know, like I said, I knew it was going to be a stupid theory, but also I'm glad I was able to sit there and disprove my own theory that I already thought was kind of a little flimsy and stupid, but just made it even more flimsy and stupid now that I tore it apart like that. So yay me. But now it's kind of like, well, more likely than anything, she was probably someone from his school, like his military life at the school. The reason why they were having pictures of him like that, like, maybe a commanding officer or teacher in the military, whatever the case may be. But definitely someone from his past. But, you know, that's as far as we go. Like, I don't have anything else to say on the subject, because, like, that was kind of my only running theory. Like, obviously it had to be someone important in his life for them to, like, be so able to stay so close to him, you know? I mean, you could have easily hired other people to do it, but for the fact is that he recognizes Shepard's voice, even though he doesn't know from where, means it was a lot easier to get a lot of access towards him because they knew each other at some point in time. So, I don't know. But another interesting side to this episode was kind of going after the chip. I mean, remember that chip situation was never resolved because they killed the guy that was they're like, well, they didn't know if they could trust him anymore. So Remy was trying to convince him to kind of, well, at least trying to convince Roman to keep him alive because, like, we need him for the chip. But Roman killed him anyway. You know, told Shepard's like, oh yeah, Remy killed him. You know, kind of finally proved her loyalty. But, you know, Roman was kind of like, no, I'm not doing that for you anymore. This is your mission. Like, it kind of, this episode kind of presented an interesting perspective on things, because it's like, you know, trying to, like, he wants his sister back. He wants Remy back so badly. And, you know, she's slowly throughout the episode remembering more stuff about when they were in an orphanage, for example. Like, she ends up having this coin. Apparently it belonged to one of the lady that looked after them while they were at that orphanage, who ended up, you know, getting killed and when they were taken. But he ends up pulling out a box that they kind of hid in a similar part of the floor, like, you know, old habits die hard and whatnot. So, like, because the coin was hidden in like a secret place in the floor, and he kind of pulls out a box. It's the last thing Remy gave to him before she wiped her memory. And Jane, he's like, oh, he could never open it. And Jane's kind of looking at it, and he's giving her a couple seconds, and he immediately snatches from her and kind of throws it back in and kind of catches an attitude. And it kind of comes back up, you know, in the episode. It's like, she's his sister. She looks like his sister, but at the same time, she's not. The sister he knows is gone. And so, like, you know, I guess on some level he was hoping when he give her the box, she'd open it immediately and kind of, like, it'd be some way of just like, oh, Remy's still there. Not this person, Jane, in front of me. Remy's still there. My sister's still there. Because he got super pissed because he's like, because Jane mistakenly said, like, oh, the first time we met. He's like, that wasn't the first time we met. We literally had an entire life, but you don't remember. And it's like, it never clicked in my brain that he would take that the hardest. Shepard is so focused on the mission, you know, it doesn't care. You know, as they said, like, you know, the reason why they don't call her mom and why they call her Shepard, because mom, she's not very, she's a little motherly, but not motherly at the same time. You know what I mean? It felt like shepherd was more of an appropriate name because that's kind of what she is, kind of shepherding her sheep. So, well, not really just sheep and just shepherding her flock is kind of what I really should have said. Nevertheless, not giving up the fact is of like what her real name is then. Because that's interesting, because it's like, I was kind of under the assumption that Shepherd, I should have known that Shepherd wasn't her real name. I mean, it's like Roman's going by his real name. But I mean, well, no, because it's not, because that's the name that was given to them by Shepherd, wasn't it? Remy and Roman, kind of leaving their old lives behind, but who they were. I mean, interestingly enough, we also learned how Roman got that scar on his face. Apparently, one of the douchebag kids at the orphanage ended up slicing his face open with a blade, like it looked like a razor blade, ended up cutting his eye and taking his coin from him. It's like, that's very douchey, but I guess it's like the environment they grew up in. And it seemed like that was still at the orphanage, not just like, hey, after they were taken. That looked like some orphanage stuff. It's like, man, the kids are douchebags. But it just never appeared to me that it would affect, it never crossed my mind that the fact that her losing her memory would affect him so much. But it's because she's always been by his side. She's always been the person that he relies on the most. She even, because Jane wanted, because she knew every time he was like, oh, we can improvise this situation. She remembered like the first time they met, how he killed those cops effortlessly, and it didn't seem like it bothered him. And she didn't want that to kind of be the situation, because that's why, like, oh, he was about to take the guard's gun, but she's like, don't do that. She saw him take the letter opener off that lady's desk, rather than letting Roman do his thing. She just choked her out that way. Just didn't want things to get really bloody. And Roman's kind of basically like, I know that you think of me as kind of like a sociopath or whatever, but I don't like killing. I don't like sadly, Roman's kind of been brainwashed by this whole thing, this mission that Shepard's on. Is it necessarily that he 100% believes it? I don't know. It makes you even wonder, did Remy ever 100% believe in it? Maybe that's the reason why he is so okay with going that far, because it's like, Remy believed in this mission, I believed in Remy, so I'll follow her till to the end. It's like, or maybe it's just kind of like, yo, Shepard kind of beat it into them, like, this is how it goes. It's like, I brought you in, I'm the one that saved you, you kind of in my debt type of situation. I don't know. He basically admits that, like, the one that kind of made him that way was Remy. She's the one that taught him to kind of kill and be the way he is. Kind of like what you might look at as very cold-hearted. He's like that because of Remy. And when she left, kind of, losing her memory and everything, Shepard kind of finished the job. So, I mean, I was really quite surprised in this episode when, because Roman is so quick to give up his life for the mission. And when I was like, if the mission is more important than one life. And during that situation, like, okay, but he's like, Jane is talking to Patterson. It's like, okay, let's copy this data over. But she sees what's happening to Roman in the hallway, and she remembers that whole situation with, getting the scar and everything, and she wanted to protect him. So she stopped it, hung up the phone with Patterson, and went out there and kicked some ass and helped save him. And she's like, oh, I trust you, about blowing open a hole to the right wall that would lead to them, being able to escape. I mean, that in itself kind of led to some stuff with Nas. Nas being like, oh, why are you doing that? You cut off the transfer of that, like Sandstorm has the final key to whatever it is they're doing. And we're still no closer to finding out what it is exactly that they have planned. But I mean, this did put them in an interesting position because Roman is more trusting of Jane now. So she's going to be more likely to be in the loop. Because when he ended up opening the box, ended up being like a gum wrapper, and that was kind of to be their substitute, because it's like, hey, with this, it's going to be something kind of like until Remy got the coin back, it'd be a substitute, because it's trash. No one would think about taking it because it's such a shiny coin. It's like it would seem valuable. That's why it got taken from. But it's like, if it's a gum wrapper or something, no one would think twice about it. And, the whole thing kind of made Roman cry. And it's just like, you actually see Jane being like, I love you. Like, because she admits that she's like, I don't want to ever be Remy again. She's like, I hope Remy never comes back, because he's actually surprised. It's like, Jane came back and helped him. He's like, Remy would have completed the mission and just left him behind. And Jane was like, I'm glad Remy's going, because I don't, she was a bad person. And that's kind of the interesting thing of like, as she's remembering more about who she was originally, the less she wants to be that person. Like I said, let's not forget, she's mentioned it multiple times that she wished she could go back to being just back when she and everyone else thought she was Taylor Shaw. Things were a lot easier back then. And speaking of that, I kind of completely skipped over the fact is that Whaler choked the hell out of that CIA guy because I didn't recognize him until they showed the flashback. I was like, oh yeah, he's the dude that tortured Jane because he was like, yeah, I'll give you the Jane Doe treatment. I was like, what the hell does that mean? And then he showed the flash. I was like, and he's like, yo, you're the one that tortured Jane, and then like Kurt had his hands like about to choke the dude out because it's like no matter what happens, he still cares about Jane. It's still there because like he didn't want that to happen to her. It's like if she was going to face the justice system, she should face it. But the fact is the CIA came and snatched her up and tortured her for like 3 months. That's not what Kurt wanted. He didn't want her to go through something like that because no matter how he feels about, no matter what his job is, he will always care about her to some degree because she's become an important part of his life. Maybe she's not the person he thought. Maybe she's not the person he thought she was, but it doesn't change the fact is that they grew closer over the time they were working together. So, but the fact of the matter is, like the whole like Jane and Roman thing, I brought it up because it's the whole Oscar situation over again because she started having feelings for Oscar, and they kind of started conflicting with like her obligations to the FBI, and so I brought it up earlier, like will we have a repeat of that? And it seems like we might get that, but it seems like Jane's more focused on anything. She's like, she tried to justify what she did. She's like, oh, I broke Roman. I can get him to kind of, turn on Shepard and Sandstorm. But whether that's true or not, I don't know. Like, I feel like Shepard has a hold on him that's not going to be that easy to kind of break apart. But I don't think it was just for the mission. I do believe that she does legitimately care about him, especially when she remembers everything. Because she kind of, she stepped up. She was like, this big sis Jane, she might not be Remy anymore, but she's still kind of a sister to him. And it does seem like, with her memories plus seeing how he is, she does seem to start caring about it. It's just a very interesting episode. I'm kind of all over the place because I've literally had to divide this up into 3 different video recordings because I've had to stop and start again like multiple times. So my brain's a little frazzled. So I kind of want to just call it there. Final notes just being like, I'm so interested to find out like what happens between Kurt and Nas now that he knows about the recordings, and then after what happened between them. It's like your situation isn't already complicated enough with Jane and Allie being your baby mama and everything. It's just your situation's already complicated enough that you just add more to make it even more complicated. Patterson and Borden, then the whole Reed situation, Tasha, and then also like the whole Jane and Sandstorm thing. Just so many mysteries. And I just, can't wait to see what we find out next episode. But that's it for this episode. I'm kind of worn out a little bit. That's what I get for... never mind. Anyway, that's it. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye. Yay. I should probably go to sleep after this because I'm kind of tired now.